You wake up, and the first thing you hear is someone knocking on your door. Not gently. Royal people don't knock gently. They knock like the door owes them money. You open it, and there stands a palace servant holding a message from the king. The king wants his portrait finished today. You look behind you at the canvas. It is nowhere near finished. Welcome to your life as a royal artist in ancient times. It sounds impressive when people hear it. Royal artist. It sounds like luxury, soft pillows, and people praising your talent. But the truth is much less glamorous. Your workshop is not some beautiful open studio. Most of the time it is a small room inside the palace walls. Cold in winter. Hot in summer. Smelling strongly of oil, egg yolks, and crushed minerals. Because making paint in ancient times was not simple. There were no paint tubes. No art stores. You had to make everything yourself. If you wanted red paint, you crushed minerals like cinnabar. If you wanted green, you ground up malachite stone. And if the king wanted bright blue, well, that was a problem. The famous ultramarine blue came from a stone called lapis lazuli. And that stone came all the way from Afghanistan. It was so expensive that, in many places, it was literally worth more than gold. Painters did not use it freely. Usually it was reserved for very important things, like the robes of saints in church paintings. So if the king says, "Use more blue," your wallet quietly cries in the corner. You begin your day early. Very early. Before sunrise. Because artists in royal courts often worked from morning until late evening. Sometimes even longer when deadlines were close. You dip your brush into paint and begin working on the king's portrait. But painting a king is not like painting a normal person. You cannot paint what you see. You must paint what the king wants to see. If the king is older, you make him look younger. If he is tired, you make him look powerful. If he is not very handsome, well, congratulations. You just discovered your most important artistic skill. Creative improvement. Many royal portraits were basically ancient versions of photo filters. Except instead of pressing a button, you spent 3 days fixing someone's nose. Around mid-morning, the king walks in to inspect the painting. This is the stressful part. Because kings rarely agree with what you have done. He looks at the portrait. He squints. He tilts his head. Then he says something terrifying. That single sound means you are about to redo half the painting. He points at the portrait. My beard should look stronger. You look at the beard. It already looks strong enough to command an army. But you nod politely. Yes, your majesty. Because arguing with a king is a very short career move. You begin repainting the beard. Again, lunchtime finally arrives. Your meal is simple. Bread, maybe cheese, sometimes soup. Royal artists were respected, but they were still workers. You were not eating at the king's table. You were eating in the corner with other craftsmen. Stone cutters, carpenters, metal workers. You all share the same tired look. After lunch, work continues. And now your back begins to hurt. Painting for hours does that. Especially when working on walls or ceilings. One famous artist, Michelangelo, complained about this while painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling. He wrote that his neck hurt, his back bent, and paint kept dripping on his face. So if your neck feels terrible after hours of painting, congratulations. You and Michelangelo share the same problem. The afternoon gets worse when the queen visits. Queens love portraits, and they love changes. She looks at the painting. The king's smile should look kinder. Of course, you just made him look powerful this morning. Now he must look friendly. So you repaint the mouth. Again, by this point you have learned an important rule of royal art. Paintings are never finished. They are simply abandoned when the king finally stops giving suggestions. While you work, your apprentice sits nearby grinding pigments. Apprenticeship in ancient times was not easy. Young artists often trained for 5 to 7 years. Their first job was not painting. It was cleaning brushes, mixing paint, preparing wooden panels, and doing all the boring work. Basically, the apprentice did everything except the fun part. But it was the only way to become a professional artist. Late in the afternoon, something stressful happens. The royal advisor enters the room. Advisors were famous for having opinions about everything. He walks slowly around the painting. Then he says something terrible. The king's nose is slightly wrong. Slightly wrong. Those 2 words mean 2 more hours of work. You carefully begin adjusting the nose. A little shadow here. A little highlight there. Trying to make the king look powerful, kind, wise, and heroic, all at the same time, which is a very difficult job. even for a talented artist. Finally, the sun begins to set. Your hands are tired. Your eyes burn from staring at tiny details all day. But the painting is almost finished. Almost. The king returns for one last look. You stand very still while he studies the portrait. This moment feels like waiting for exam results. Then suddenly he smiles. Good. Just one word. But that one word means success. You will be paid. You will not have to repaint the beard again. And most importantly, you still have your job. The king leaves the room. The palace grows quiet. You finally sit down and stretch your aching back. Being a royal artist sounds glamorous. But most days it feels like endless pressure. Long hours, expensive materials, and very powerful customers who can change their minds every 10 minutes. Still, there's one good thing. Centuries later, people might still look at your painting. They might stand in a museum and admire it. They might say, "What a masterpiece." They will never know how many times you repainted that beard, or that nose, or that smile. And honestly, you're probably fine with that.